All right. Well, we are super excited to have our very own South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem join us today. Governor Kristi Noem is a wife, a mother, a lifelong rancher, farmer, and small business owner. In 2010, after serving in the South Dakota legislature for several years, Noem was elected to serve as South Dakota's lone member of the U.S. House of Representatives. During her time in Congress, in addition to many other successes, Governor Noem helped pass the Tax Cut and Jobs Act and put $2,400 back into the pockets of the average South Dakota family. In 2018, with the platform of protecting South Dakotans against tax increases, government growth, federal intrusions, and government secrecy, she was elected as South Dakota's first ever female governor. As Governor Noem has respected the rights of her people by trusting them to exercise their personal responsibility to make the best decision for themselves, their loved ones, and in turn their communities. This approach has been most evident in her response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Governor Noem never ordered a single business or church to close and never issued a statewide shelter-in-place order. Despite all of this, Governor Noem often says her greatest accomplishment is raising her 3 children, Cassidy, Kennedy, and Booker, with her husband Brian. All have a deep love for their family and even deeper love for the Lord. Please stand and give a warm welcome to South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem.
You're good.
Hi everybody, how are you? Good. I kind of felt like I was coming down the aisle at church or something, going to the altar. You all were going to fix me. Good to see you. Thank you so much for letting me come and visit with you a little bit. I know I'm a few minutes late, so I won't talk long, but I just wanted to give you an update on South Dakota, how we're doing, and a little bit of legislative issues that were passed and some funding that came, and then take a few questions. So if you have questions for me, I'll certainly take those as well. But listen, I think South Dakota's doing well as far as getting through the virus. I hope all of you and your families and businesses are doing well. We got through 2020 together, and I think the cooperation that we saw was incredible. My goal the whole time, I was pretty clear that I was going to give people flexibility. Let them take care of their family's health, but also be able to take care of their employees, keep them in their jobs, and then also serve their customers. So I hope that that worked for you and your community, and it allowed us to also share our story about South Dakota to the rest of the country. When I ran for governor, I talked about the fact that I believe South Dakota could be an example to the nation, and that was by really focusing on what makes South Dakota special. We knew we had to grow, that our economy needed to grow, that we wanted more kids in our schools and our small towns to thrive, and I think 2020 really gave us the opportunity to tell our story. We right now in South Dakota, the statistics are that we had the least amount of hours lost by workers in the nation. The least amount of wages were lost by individuals in positions and jobs in 2020. We also had the least amount of businesses close in the state across the country. We have the lowest unemployment rate at 2.9% in the country, and we also have the fastest and highest growing GDP rate in the nation. The next closest to us is Texas at 7.5%, and South Dakota right now, our GDP rate is at 9.9%. So I think what's remarkable is that we have thousands of people moving to South Dakota right now, and we have hundreds of businesses that are coming. Our economic development team is, I could triple the size of that staff right now, and they wouldn't be able to answer the phone for all the people that are coming here and want to come here. And what I think is very special is people tell me all the time that they're worried about that. They don't want South Dakota to change, and I certainly understand that. What was remarkable about 2020 is that I found that we're recruiting a lot of people who want to be in South Dakota because they like South Dakota the way it is. They want to live somewhere where their kids can be in classrooms, where they can have their freedoms to be protected, and they want a government that respects them. And that is why they're coming. So if we were ever going to grow our state, I think it was a unique opportunity for us to recruit people here to be a part of our lives that really do share our values, which I think is going to be a wonderful chance for us to really use that to strengthen South Dakota for the long term. Now, this last legislative session was a little bit different than I think what most states had to deal with. Most states were either cutting spending and programs because they didn't have enough money, they were financing debt that they'd had, or trying to fix their pension funds because they were struggling, they were dealing with a lot of fraud in their unemployment systems. That just wasn't our story in South Dakota. We actually had hundreds of millions of extra dollars to deal with because we are seeing historic revenues in the state of South Dakota like we've never seen before. Our sales tax rate has been higher than we have ever had recorded in the history of the state. That I think everybody who wanted to take a vacation in 2020, they came to South Dakota and did that. And then some of them just decided to pack up and move and stay here. So that's been very beneficial for us as far as taking care of South Dakota's needs. My priorities going into session was asking the legislators if they would put money into trust funds. Trust funds give us the ability to get interest rate returns that go into the general fund on a continual basis. So that generates, we every year get about $4 to $5 million that goes right into the bottom line of the general fund because of interest off of the trust funds that we already have. They did put money into the trust funds, which was remarkable. We also put more money into reserves than typically happens. Typically, they put in 10% into reserves to have for a rainy day. This year, we put 12% of our budget into reserves. And then beyond that, I asked them to make long-term decisions. I wanted them to make investments into things that would benefit us for 20 to 30 years. So infrastructure, into projects that would really give our small communities and our larger communities the opportunity to grow and sustain and be there. So the legislature did fantastic work making sure that those were funded and their priorities as well. We invested into our technical schools, into workforce training. I think that's a lot of your challenges is workforce right now and getting them trained to fill the jobs that you have. We also focused on licensure reform, especially in regards to healthcare. We wanted people that came here that were in the healthcare field to be able to get licensed right away and get to work. We also did some city zoning regulations that dealt with, universal city zoning across the state that would streamline and drive down costs on putting in housing into the future, and they did a lot of great work on funding broadband. When I first got elected governor, I talked about the fact that I believed every single community and home in this state needed to have high-speed internet. They needed to educate their kids, to run their businesses, and we also needed to make sure now that we're getting our healthcare many times and other services, what 2020 taught us is that so many services can be delivered over the internet. So the first year they funded 10 million of that to partner with federal funds and businesses, but this year we ended up putting $75 million of state funds, matching it with 25 million that we got from the Coronavirus Relief Fund to match with federal funds, and also what the private industry is going to match with it as well. We should be able to build out the entire state to high-speed internet access, which is going to be fantastic. That is something that would have normally taken us 10 years to do, and our legislature did that in 1 year. So we need to thank them for that. So we will be going into this next year in a good position to build on our values and responsible budget making that we've always done, but also giving you some unique tools to get people licensed. We're working hard on apprenticeship programs. We're working hard on making sure that there's opportunities out there for our kids to stay here. The Freedom Scholarship was the first priority for many legislators that I brought forward, that created a needs-based scholarship for the first time in the state of South Dakota. That'll allow our kids to stay here in South Dakota as well and give them an opportunity to get the education they need to fill some of the jobs that we typically lose kids to. So we're excited about what the future holds, and I think we're in a good spot. We've got more to do, but boy, you guys, just want you to know how humbling and what an honor it is for me to work with you every day and to work with your families. I think people ask me all the time what is so special about South Dakota, and every day it is the people here. It is the people here that we knew when we face an incredible challenge that we will do it together, and we all want to know that we've got each other's backs. And you certainly showed that to the country this year, and I think that's why so many people, they tell me, when we grow up, we want to be South Dakota. And well, you can come be with South Dakota, you just can't change us. So we're excited about it, and I just want to thank you for all of your help and your hard work. And with that, I will stop, and I will see if you have questions for me, if that's okay. Yes, way back there.
As a pastor, I'd like to thank you for your support for religious liberty. Thank you for helping keep the church open. What can we do about intrusions on our religious freedom? I know it's not South Dakota, but HR 5, we've never had a greater threat to our religious liberty in my lifetime. Do you have anything we can do to help protect our religious liberties here in South Dakota?
Yeah, I think we should be very concerned about that. We just should be. We have incredible challenges in front of us because we watched the national media and even some on different political sides use fear to control people this year. And I was really shocked by how quickly I watched people in other states give up their freedom of religion, their freedom of assembly, even their freedom of speech. And it happened so fast. I tell folks quite often that when I served in Congress and represented you just a few years ago, I knew that when I was in the House, that of those 435 members that were there was probably 60 or 70 of them that really truly believed in socialist policies. There was several handfuls of them that believed in communist policies, but they never would have admitted it publicly. And that's what I think has changed so dramatically in the last couple of years, is that now they boldly stand up and hold press conferences and talk about how they want to remake America into the image of socialism. And so if we think so many times that this isn't our fight, we're wrong. Because we're dramatically remaking this country by what we're letting the narrative be. And it's gonna take good people who love this country to stand up and not just talk about the decisions that we make, we have to educate people as to why we're making the decisions that we make. You saw me during the pandemic when I did all those endless days of press conferences. Some of those press conferences just turned into a freedom speech. Some of them just turned into why the Constitution is important and what it did for us and how it's kept America the greatest country in the world for hundreds of years. And we just have forgotten, I think, and gotten lazy about really educating the value of that and what is unique about our republic, and we have to continue to do it. So in South Dakota, I will protect your religious freedom. But I do want you to know that it might get tough. It might get tough here. You know, South Dakota has a lot of federal dollars that come into this state. It's got a lot of different areas that the federal government can make our lives difficult. But I am a firm believer that there are people who fought and died for this country to keep us free, and the least we can do is stand for those freedoms, and in our jobs, wherever we are, make sure that we're doing our responsible thing in defending them as well. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Rich Gordon.
Yes.
Thanks, Kristi, for you taking care of our state for the last year. I look across the country and I'm so thankful to be here. I wanted to ask you, how do we navigate through this gender issue with athletics and all of that? It's brand new, but it's trouble.
Yeah, it's hard because we want to love people, and we do love people, and that is what we have to make sure that we're conveying all the time. My issue has been on the women's sports issue, is that I believe girls should play girls' sports, and that boys should play boys' sports. We know from decades of science and research that they are built differently, and that there are different physical traits that give advantages to males over females. And we fought years ago, for decades ago, to get Title IX into federal law, to give opportunities for success and scholarship and education and opportunities for women. And I'm gonna defend that federal law. I think it's incredibly important that we do, and we have a conversation specifically about the science of it. And that's an issue that's about creating a fairness and a level playing field between men and women. Most people forget that I fought this battle years ago. Several years ago, the federal government came down to the sport of rodeo in the state of South Dakota and told them they could no longer have girls' events and boys' events. They told them that they had to open all events in the sport of rodeo in the 4-H program to all genders. And the sport of rodeo was asking for help. They went to our congressional delegation, they went to every single member of Congress and Senate and governors, and I was the only one who went to USDA and constantly went after them and petitioned them and brought legislation and argued with them until finally they backed off. It was USDA that has jurisdiction over the 4-H program. But I fought this years ago to protect girls' events and boys' events in the sport of rodeo. We're probably gonna have to do that again. And we all just need to remember that we all love each other. We all are incredibly special people. On this issue, when it comes to sports, it's about fairness and about the science and the difference when it comes to males and females. Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Mike Emery, University benefits.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And handles some state long-term care and calculation.
Yeah,
But,
I remember. When you said Risty, I remembered all the pile of Risty letters on my desk, yes. Yeah.
Some things going on where we almost lost some benefits for
Yeah.
employees, but she helped us save. At any rate, I moved here 6 years ago. My wife's assistant dean of nursing at SD. We moved here 6 years ago from the DC area where I grew up. I have firsthand knowledge of what it should not be. I have firsthand knowledge of what it's looking like out here. How do we have things in place where I don't see what it used to look like? Just because somebody comes in with a smile and the wrong idea, in the back there, when it happens, I've seen it. It's not out here, I love it out here. But how do we stop that? How do I stop that from the kids? Are there things in place? They'll use laws in this way because, oh, well, it's free, I can come by any land I want, it's for sale. I can put any business I want in there because I'm meeting the EPA, whatever they want to say. Do we have things in place? Are there things that we're looking ahead to? Yes, we're open. Yes, it's a great place to be, but hey, how about you leave the black sheep at home?
Well, we are, and we have been, but it's gonna be a continual day-by-day decision-making process. Every decision I make has to be based on the same things that I told you when I campaigned on. It's amazing to me the hundreds of decisions I make each week that either back up what I stand on TV and say, or they undermine what I say on TV. So when I say I'm gonna defend your freedoms, there are probably 20 decisions today where I will have to make in some agency, department, federal regulation that will come down from Washington DC. Well, I will have to fight for your freedoms. For instance, the DOD came out, told us, directed to us that all of our National Guard men and women had to be mandated to wear masks when they were at work in the state of South Dakota. And I said to them back, I said to my general counsel, send them a letter and tell them last time I checked, I was the commander-in-chief of our National Guard. But, I was the only governor that did it. I was the only governor that told them no, that I would be the commander of our National Guard, and that they didn't have the authority to tell us to do that in our state of South Dakota. So it's, and it was the same thing when they asked for troops to go to Washington DC for inauguration. I would not send our National Guard there unless I knew exactly where they would be. I knew they would be put up in nice hotels. I said they had to be served 3 hot meals a day. I also said that they had to be carrying their weapons and they were going to be carrying ammunition too. And I was sending all my commanders so they'd be under the command of our commanders and not somebody else there that wasn't somebody that I would trust to make the right decisions for our people. So that's one of the reasons why you saw some National Guard men and women sleeping in garages. That was not our guys. That was not our people, because their leader didn't make the best decision for them. So I'm just gonna try to be trustworthy for you and do that, but I also want you to continue to recognize that leadership has consequences. And there's a lot of families across this country that are living with some bad consequences because of the leadership that they've chosen. So if ever there was a time to get over ourselves and start talking to people again, there's a lot of people you quit talking to because politics has gotten so ugly. I just need you to get over it and start talking to them again. take the emotion and the anger out of it, and just have a conversation about what's happening on our streets and in our schools and our day-to-day lives, that we really should care what kind of leadership is impacting them. So it's going to be something that I think people will continue to watch us and what we do here. And my goal is that, that we understand that this is a special place and that we're willing to still get along and love each other, but also make the right decisions that will make sure that we do protect the freedoms that this country is known for. So, all right, I think I've got time for one more question. Yep, right there. Oh, maybe two, I saw two hands.
What is your position on the unapproved FDA vaccination? And what do you think about the censorship of the doctors that are coming forward begging us not to take the vaccine? And also, thirdly,
Oh, wow, I hope I can remember them all.
what about the drugs that were censored from all of America, like the hydroxychloroquine and some of the others? Why can't we use those here in our state?
Well, you can use it here in our state. You just have to have a doctor that will allow you to use it or prescribe it for you if you want to use those types of drugs. I think vaccines should be optional for people who want them. And if people don't want to get them, I don't think they should be forced to take them. So the drugs and the vaccines were gone through an emergency process that was as regulated, but not quite through the entire FDA process as well. So that's the concern that I hear people coming through. But I do know that for many people, it is the decision that they're comfortable with is to get the vaccine. There's people that don't want to. That's why I think we in South Dakota should be making the decision that it's not mandated, that people can do that if they want to, and if they don't want to, they shouldn't be shamed for that either. The doctors being censored, I think a lot of that probably isn't a role for me to weigh in on because it's not an area that I have jurisdiction over. Although I think now is not the time for us to be limiting the freedom of speech of individuals. I think that there's basic, protocols that we follow when it comes to violent speak or anything that would have real consequences for doing damage to individuals in their physical and mental harm. But I think beyond that, we need to be able to express ourselves, and that's one of the reasons people came to this country in the first place. Okay, there was one more hand I saw.
My question is, can you sign this picture?
I probably can, if it's a good one. If I look like a crazy lady, I'm not signing it. Okay, well, thank you everybody for letting me be with you. I appreciate it.